Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. If you or someone close to you owns their own business and is thinking about succession planning, you're in luck, because on this episode, we're going to address the three questions business owners should ask before they begin succession planning. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. One of the biggest challenges facing many business owners is making time to work on their business. They spend all their time working in their business instead of on their business. Now, if that sounds familiar, I'd like to invite you to join us today as we address the three questions business owners should ask before they begin succession planning. To discuss this and more is my very special guest, Ricci Victorio. She is President and Master Certified Coach of Fairfield, California-based Victoria Consulting. Ricci provides coaching, communication, leadership, and teamwork training programs to individuals and organizations across the U.S. and Canada. Ricci, thank you very much for joining us again. Great to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Wayne.
Great to have you on. And again, like I talked earlier, one of the things I learned and discovered back, years and years ago, is this whole idea of working on your business or versus working in your business. And again, I think people in my industry are also guilty of that, is they tend to focus on the minutia, and they don't take a chance to stand back and take a good look at how they run their operations and do any kind of business planning or goal setting for themselves. So really looking forward to our conversation. I would like to note that, in case you missed Ricci's previous appearance, I'd encourage you to go to our website and take a look at that episode when we talked about C-suite executive those highly compensated C-suite executives and the questions they have to ask about, quite frankly, what's next? What am I going to do next? So that was a great episode. I encourage you to check that one out. One of the points that we talked about at the end of that episode is the idea of collaboration between, yourself and your clients' trusted advisors, and referring to, of course, to their attorneys, their accountants, their insurance professionals, financial advisors. Maybe just to discuss your point of view on that again, and from the context of dealing with a business owner looking at succession planning.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see succession as a team sport, or, because I was from the theater, an ensemble activity. It's hard to do a whole play by yourself unless it's a one-man show. And a lot of business owners do feel like they're a one-man show. There are so many moving pieces in succession. No one can be an expert at everything. So I am an expert in people. You are a financial expert. We would need an estate planning and trust attorney, or an estate planning, and someone who specializes in business trust. An insurance professional. Usually there's a business CPA. This would be.
I would hope so, please. Yes.
Thank you. That would be the A team, I would say, sitting at the table. And I spent 25 years sitting at the table with this kind of team in succession planning. So I've learned enough about structures that I could be arrested. But once succession planning is formulated and it's moving into some real planning, then it's time to get the B team in. So whether that's your management team, definitely family, whether there's family in the business or out, your spouse, whether your spouse has been included with the A team. I would highly recommend that, because I've seen horrible outcomes when they have been excluded. But we pull people in as we need, but we need those experts to help guide us. What's legal? What's the structure? What can we afford? How do we financially do this? And who's in the boat with us? And that's, my job is helping the people in the boat all row in the same direction. Because, in a family business, as many different individuals that are involved, you're going to have that many different opinions. So how do we get people
And I think a
rowing in
big
the
issue
same
there with
direction.
that is everybody being heard, right?
Well, yeah. And if they all try to speak at the same time, you have a cacophony, and uh, no one feels heard. So, yeah, there's the direction of how do we get everyone in the room to be heard, and how do we get everyone in the room to be listening?
Okay, now I realize I may have some additional questions here going, but let's get right to the three questions. Let's address the three questions business owners should ask before they begin succession planning. I'm going to start off with question number one, and you just brought up family. So question number one is, how do I get my adult children involved in my succession plan?
Well, they probably have been involved in your succession plan since they were born, uh,
To some degree, yes.
to some degree. So I think there are a few things that um, the attorneys I know that when a new client comes to them who wants succession planning, they refer them to me first. They say, you need to speak to a coach to get clear on what your vision is. So then we don't spend a lot of expensive time running around in circles trying to, whack-a-mole with all the different worries. So boundaries are really important when you have family in the business. You can't run a family like a business. No, you cannot. And you cannot run a business like a family. And we've seen
Well
some
said.
businesses,
Well said.
right? So, one fatal mistake when you have family in the business, kids in the business, is you think, oh, we're all gathering at Thanksgiving. Let's talk about stock inheritance or jobs or my succession plan. And you you need boundaries so that business conversations happen around a business conversation, and that Thanksgiving is around family conversation. And one of the biggest
Well
errors,
said.
I've seen
Well
it.
said.
Oh, my dad pulled me aside at my son's birthday party and started talking about transfer of stock. I didn't know what to do. So that's really important. I will say survival skill set number one for anybody with family in the business is communication of your thinking, communication in collaboration, feedback, and asking for ideas, and in communication, learning to actively listen and not be reactive or offer advice. So you can see it's the same one, communication and communication, communication, but there's different levels of that. And that's why a coach, someone like me, who I would say is a communication expert, the first thing we do is we teach the family how to talk about sensitive issues, identifying, well, what will make it safe for us to be honest? How can we tell dad what we're thinking? And I've had tears at the table, of daughter saying, you never listen to me, you never, what I've heard it all. And so that leads me to the third element of when you have family in the business, at least, is structures. So in order to have that safe environment that's not at the Thanksgiving dinner table, is developing a family council. And a family council, I have it with my family. Like when we need to have a family council, it means we have to talk about something important. And I don't want to do it when we gather for Christmas. And we have to make a decision about something that's important to the family. So it's designed to share matters that are important about the family business or the enterprise or the business of the family, which would be inheritance or making decisions about, well, mom and I have decided we're going to move to Saskatchewan, but we live in Texas, mom. Why are you doing that? That's an important
Well, they
conversation,
better
right?
call me first, is all I'll say. That'll
So
be a
the
radical move.
family council is a place to say we're developing roadmaps for our kids in the business. If you want to come into the business, if they're younger, if you want to have, I did this with my kids. If you want to work with us in our family business, you're going to need to have a master's in psychology. You're going to need to, get this kind of experience. I want you to work for somebody else for a while before you work for me, so that you can make your mistakes somewhere else and not when your name's on the sign, right? So, and also I've helped clients who've ignored that. And now their kids all have masters. They went to work for other companies and they have no second generation in their business, or third. I see it a lot in third generation because they have the wherewithal to send their kids to Yale, to send their kids to Cambridge, and then they go off in the world. And now they have a lack of talent. So you need roadmaps to onboard adult experienced professionals to woo them back if you need them.
Interesting.
Really, really important.
I gotta segue off of that one for you before we get to question number two, Ricky. So what happens, what I hear often in talking to my colleagues, both here in Southern California and across the country, is with business owners, is they have issues of either having like really young children, or often the case, their children aren't interested in their business. So the question would be, what if they are too young or simply not interested, like in the
Right.
business? How do you contend with that?
So,
If we're in the midst of a discussion about succession planning.
right. When I'm doing this with a couple of clients right now where kids are in mid-career, they're going to be inheritors of a very profitable entity. And so what there is a board of directors that the owners have created already, but they never invited anybody to show up, to come to the board of directors. So we now have board observers where we're bringing in G3. They're adults, they're in their 40s, and they're participating. They're non-voting members on the board, and they've been on the board now for 4 years and really participating. They don't vote still, but they get to weigh in and they're helping make decisions that are really critical. We have hired professional managers to run the company, but we want to train the next generation to be good stewards as owners. So we want to prepare them for ownership on the board, not necessarily roles in running the company. And I think having a board of directors when the kids are too young also, and this may go into our next question about management team, but having a management advisory board, which is different than a board of directors, where you pull in all your key managers and you might have an advisor, definitely a succession coach advisor there helping. This is a way you can create a succession bridge if your kids are too young, is you instill leadership on your management team and we teach them how to work together. It's not safe to decide this one manager is going to be my successor, because if they quit, you're up a creek, right? So what we've learned is we create a team, a small team that runs the company together, and you're a mighty team together. You still have work-life balance. You can bring in kids that are developing or be the bridge for that 10, 15 years. But if one leaves, you still have the others and you can bring a new person in. So you have more stability in your leadership while you're waiting for your kids to grow up or make a decision about how they fit
What they
in. And
want to
they
do.
might
Well,
not.
at least you're giving them a chance to kind of be active observers at worst
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
how the business is being. Okay, Ricky. So Ricky Victorio is our guest today. She's been amazing providing us information. Again, if you're a business owner looking at succession planning, this is the episode for you. And I think one of the big questions we want to ask here is question number two is, how do I ensure, now think about this in the context of the word is out now that we're talking about succession planning. So it's out there now and everybody's hearing about it. How do I ensure I have that buy-in from my management team as we move forward? How do I avoid either a mutiny or some kind of everybody running in all directions here?
Oh, sure.
So what
I
kind of
think
just what secures the stability of how do we secure the stability of the business in what obviously now could be potentially what I guess you would call a transition phase?
so. That's if you want to push the hard button. And if you want to push the easy button, do everything in number one that I already said:
Right.
communication, communication, communication. But this is where the management advisory board is super important, because you want to pull them in and include them when you're ready. Now, the planning has to happen first, but when we pull them together to say, we see you as our leadership team. Now, many times it depends on the business. You want to have some kind of a vested retirement supplemental plan that encourages these managers to stay. And the reason why it needs to be vested is you want to make sure they stay for those 5 or 10 years so that their benefit grows. You know, you put the seed in and you get the tree. But you want them to be incentivized to
Be
grow the
rewarded.
business. And
Yeah.
not just to stay and maintain, but you want them to have an ownership interest. So, you have thresholds. If you hit above what we're used to, we're going to increase this benefit. You want them to get excited about growing the company, but also mentoring your kids. So it's not easy to mentor the owner's kid. It isn't. I've done it, even for my own partners. And it's not easy. It's even harder to mentor your own children. Really much
That's for
harder.
sure.
So you want to have a training ground, not just for your kids, but for all of the younger employees that are growing into middle level management or managers. You want to be growing your managers. So I highly advise, this is what gets them excited, because you've now created a way for them to have a vested retirement plan that's going to make them feel thanked for hanging in there, and it's worthwhile. So they have a roadmap for their own career and financial security, as well as you've built in a leadership team that makes it safe and easy to grow and mentor the next set of leaders.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me. And I love when you talk about retirement planning. So you're
I'm
scratching
speaking your
that
language.
itch for me, Ricky. Thank you very much. And okay, so I'm just going to move on to question number 3. So we've done all this great planning. Everybody's always optimistic, right? It's always going to work. So question number 3, what do I do if the initial succession plan doesn't work? What if it doesn't work out the way we thought?
Well, because we push the easy button, you do number
Yeah.
1 and number 2. Do everything I said in number 1 and do everything I said in number 2. And if you do those things, you will have the maximum ability to improvise, basically. You have all options available to you. So successful succession, does not always include family members. It does with working within the business. They could own it and not work within, like one of my clients. You could also, as we said, train your inheriting family members to be a good board of directors and have professional managers running the business. That is good succession. You could do sale to employees, an ESOP. I helped a restaurant group here in the Bay Area. He sold to his employees, and that really boosted morale because he didn't have kids who wanted to be in that business. Also, sale of business operations to a third party while retaining property or land for long-term leases. That's another form of succession, of financial benefit for the next generation, but you're not operating the business. And I work with some wineries where they don't have family interested, or it can't sustain. So they're selling the winery and doing long-term leases of the vineyards and maintaining ownership of the land. So that also, to me, qualifies as succession. So when you do all of what I said in number 1 and number 2, you can then you can adapt at any time your planning according to what presents itself 10, 15, or 20 years later.
And you're keeping the operation operational, right?
Right.
You're not
working on
having
business
to,
success.
like, I think the term you used earlier was whack-a-mole. Like, all of a sudden you're like trying to keeping the place going. When people are leaving, like it makes
No.
a more cohesive process. Well,
Yeah.
recently I sat in on a webinar and the guest speaker was a CPA who specialized in advising business owners specifically. That was his area of expertise. And,
Mhm.
during the webinar, he brought up something I thought was really interesting. He said that he thought the best time for a business owner to start succession planning was when the business was in its startup phase,
Mm.
right? What are your like? I'm sure this is probably something you've heard before. What are your thoughts on this, as opposed to like the traditional we hear all the time, among my colleagues is that try to inspire, encourage clients, to start thinking about succession planning, 3 to 5 years beforehand. The sort of other perspective was start when you're basically the single cell amoeba, if you will. You start with this. Let's start thinking about succession planning then. Your thoughts on
Well,
that?
I would say the best advice I heard was from an attorney is when you are making plans to become partners, the best plan, operating agreement and partnership agreement includes how you're going to break up. Same thing in, like a prenup, basically.
Mm-hmm.
With when you are starting a business, you should be thinking about what happens, how to get out one way or the other. You want to think about if we have to close the business, if the partnership dissolves, if there's succession, if we get to have succession, if there's a divorce and your partners, you and your spouse are business partners. I've had to deal with that,
Mm-hmm.
or a surprise disability, or death before we figured it would
Mm-hmm.
happen. The best time to plan is before you're faced with those decisions. So I know it's hard to think about succession when you're starting a business because you're still wondering, will I
Is it
have
ever going to
anything?
actually happen, right?
Right. But if you sometimes when you start a business, you have family members involved. The husband and wife work, maybe you've got kids in college and they get involved. I mean, family businesses are created out of families that help each other. So you might
Mm-hmm.
have in-laws, you might have outlaws, you might have cousins, you don't know. So if you have family members involved and might soon be ready to be owners or partners, you do have to think about it right off the bat. Even if the stock is worth zero right now, that's you would know that's the best time to be
Buy
handing
low,
out stock is when
buy
it's
low.
zero, right? Now, if you have maybe you don't have children yet, maybe they're babies, then you can have an open plan. Even if you have some kind of plan for continuity. I would say maybe a better phrased thing to do in the beginning is to think about business continuity. What do we do if something happens to me? It might not be time for succession yet, but how do we protect the business continuity if I don't make it to work because of a
Well,
bust? Or,
here I want to chime in on that one because I do a little bit of high level business plan coaching for clients on an as needed basis. And the point that I make with them is this. If you don't have a system in place that can work while you're not there, you don't have a business, you have a job,
that's true. And,
right?
and,
So
and
I'm agreeing 100% that
that is
there's
so true. And if you think about it, in most privately held businesses, family owned businesses, there's not just one family involved. You have managers who are bringing in their kids for a summer job. You have your sister saying, your nephew needs a job. He's graduated from college. I want you to hire him. So
right,
you've got all kinds of people, multiple levels of family businesses. And I remember one particular um, car dealership where it was super important to them. They loved the family environment, but they were having trouble. Managers who were bringing in their kids were having trouble managing their kids. So we created a family member employment policy, not only for the owner's family members to make it easy to say you have to meet these qualifications before we can hire you, and there has to be an actual job, or we can't make up a job for you. But also that policy was for anybody who wanted to bring their family member, husband, nephew, whatever
the
they
case.
could hire, but they had to sign off on the family member employment policy. It had the qualifications, but it also had behavioral expectations. We expect you to perform above and beyond. We expect you to come in early, leave late, set an example, don't be raped, don't take, use your family name as a weapon, blah, 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 all, I mean, I've seen all kinds of behaviors. So to have something that allows the manager then to manage that family member of whoever it is to say, you've just broken 5 of the cardinal rules. I'm sorry, you're on timeout or you're fired.
Right.
I think the cardinal rule is being a family member is not, having a job in the family business is not a birthright. It is,
Interesting.
and you have to make sure that it is, an honor. It has to be earned.
Yeah. So there's a level of accountability there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, you know what? It's pretty obvious to me. We had another great conversation today, and I am confident that we probably prompted some additional questions amongst my colleagues, if not amongst the clients or their clients. That I got a funny feeling there are going to be people wanting to contact you. And as I'd asked the last time you joined us, what is the easiest and most simple way for them to contact you?
I think the easiest way is if you go to my website, victorioconsulting.com. I have buttons that say, contact me for a free consultation. It'll take you right to, you click that button. That's the easy button, takes you to my Calendly, and you can choose a time that's convenient to you.
My favorite website. God bless
I
it.
love that.
Me too. Thank God for it.
I hardly ever answer my phone unless I'm expecting someone, because I'm usually in a meeting.
Right.
So the best thing to do is schedule a time, and we can chat for 30, 45 minutes to see, I'll answer your questions and see if there isn't a way that I might be able to help you.
Perfect. Ricci, once again, I want to thank you. You've been a great guest. I look forward to keeping in touch and continuing our conversations. And what more can I say? I just really appreciate you and the time you made for us today, and great conversation. And thanks very much for joining us. Ricci Victorio is the president and master certified coach with Fairfield, California-based Victorio Consulting. And thank you again, Ricci. Take care.
You're welcome, Wayne.
I look forward to bringing you the 3 Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive a notification of when our latest episodes have been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link below in the description box, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.